The barn door creaked open at 3 in the morning, and Preston Jameson knew immediately that something was wrong because his old mare never whinnied like that unless a stranger had entered her space. He grabbed his rifle from beside the bed and pulled on his boots, not bothering to tuck in his shirt as he made his way across the dark yard of his ranch outside Globe, Arizona. The September air in 1883 still held the day's heat, and sweat beaded on his forehead as he approached the weathered structure. Preston had lived alone on this land for 5 years now, ever since his father died and left him the 100 acres of desert scrub and determination. At 26 years old, he had grown accustomed to the solitude, to the silence that stretched between dawn and dusk with only cattle and horses for company. The barn was dark except for a sliver of moonlight cutting through the gaps in the wood. Preston moved quietly, his boots finding the spots on the floor that did not creak, a skill learned from years of checking on colicky horses and expectant cows. He climbed the ladder to the hayloft, rifle ready, expecting to find a drifter or maybe one of the ranch hands from the neighboring property who had drunk too much whiskey in town. What he found instead was a woman. She was curled into the hay, her dark hair spread across the golden stalks like ink on parchment. Her dress was torn at the shoulder and covered in dust, and even in the dim light, Preston could see bruises darkening her arms. She was young, maybe 23 or 24, with a face that would have been beautiful if not for the exhaustion etched into every line. Her breathing was shallow but steady, and she clutched a small bundle to her chest. Preston lowered his rifle and stood there for a long moment, uncertain. He had found injured animals before, had nursed them back to health with patience and care, but a woman was different. A woman came with complications, with questions, with a story that might bring trouble to his doorstep, but he could not leave her there. He climbed back down the ladder and returned to the house, where he pumped water into a basin and gathered clean cloths. He found an old quilt his mother had made before she passed and carried everything back to the barn. The woman had not moved, and for a moment, Preston worried she might be more injured than he had initially thought. But when he touched her shoulder gently, her eyes flew open, and she scrambled backward into the hay, terror written across her features. "Easy now," Preston said, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "You are on my property in my barn. I am not going to hurt you." The woman stared at him, her chest heaving, her eyes darting toward the ladder as if calculating whether she could make it down before he could stop her. The bundle she held turned out to be a cloth sack, and she clutched it tighter. "My name is Preston Jameson. This is my ranch. Are you hurt? Do you need a doctor?" She shook her head slowly, still watching him like a cornered animal. Her lips were cracked and dry, and when she tried to speak, only a hoarse whisper emerged. "Water." Preston handed her the canteen he had brought, and she drank deeply, some of the water spilling down her chin in her desperation. When she finally lowered the canteen, she wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and met his eyes. "Thank you," she said, her voice still rough but stronger. "I am sorry for trespassing. I will leave at first light." "Where will you go?" She looked away. "I do not know." Preston settled himself on a hay bale, keeping his distance so she would not feel threatened. "It is the middle of the night, and you look like you have been through hell. Why do not you tell me what happened, and we can figure out what comes next when the sun rises?" The woman was silent for so long that Preston thought she might not answer, but then she took a shaky breath and began to speak. "My name is Olivia Vance," she said. 3 days ago, I was supposed to marry a man named Silas Cortland in Tucson. He owns a silver mine and half the businesses in town. My father owed him money, a lot of money from gambling debts, and when he could not pay, Silas offered to forgive everything if I would marry him. Preston felt anger stirring in his gut, but he kept his expression neutral and let her continue. I tried to refuse, but my father said we would lose everything, that we would be out on the street. He begged me, and I thought maybe it would not be so bad. Maybe Sila's would be kind or at least tolerable. Her voice broke, and she paused to collect herself. But 2 nights before the wedding, I went to his house for dinner. He had been drinking, and he started talking about how I was his property now, how he could do whatever he wanted with me once we were married. He grabbed me, and when I tried to pull away, he hit me. Preston's hands clenched into fists, but he remained still. I managed to get away and ran back to my father's house. I told him what happened, showed him the bruises, begged him to call off the wedding. Tears streamed down Olivia's face now, and she did not bother to wipe them away. He said I was being dramatic, that all men had tempers, that I just needed to learn how to manage Sila's better. He said if I did not go through with the wedding, he would disown me. So you ran. I took what little money I had saved, some bread and cheese from the kitchen, and I left in the middle of the night. I have been walking ever since, staying off the main roads, sleeping wherever I could find shelter. I knew Sila's would send men looking for me. He does not like to lose what he considers his. Preston leaned back against the barn wall, processing everything she had told him. In the silence that followed, he could hear the horses shifting in their stalls below and the distant call of a coyote on the mesa. Did anyone follow you here? I do not think so. I was careful, but I cannot be certain. How much money did your father owe? $5,000. Preston whistled low. It was a staggering sum, more than most men in the territory made in 5 years. Your father had a serious problem. Had, Olivia said quietly. I heard in a town I passed through yesterday that he died 2 days ago. His heart gave out. I am sorry. She shrugged, but Preston could see the pain beneath the gesture. He chose a debt over his daughter. I grieved for him a long time ago. They sat in silence as the night slowly gave way to dawn. Preston found himself studying Olivia in the growing light, noting the proud set of her shoulders despite her exhaustion, the intelligence in her dark eyes, the way she held herself together even as her world had fallen apart. She was nothing like the saloon girls in town or the few ranch daughters he had met at church socials. There was a strength in her, a resilience that reminded him of the desert plants that bloomed even in the harshest conditions. You can stay here, he heard himself saying. For as long as you need to figure things out. Olivia looked at him sharply. Why would you do that? You do not know me. I know enough. I know you would rather sleep in a stranger's barn than marry a man who hits you. I know you are brave enough to walk for 3 days through country that kills grown men, and I know what it is like to be alone with nowhere to turn. I cannot pay you. I am not asking you to, but if you want to earn your keep, I could use help around the ranch. My housekeeper quit last month to move to California with her sister, and I have been living on burnt beans and jerky ever since. The house needs cleaning, the garden has gone to weeds, and I have about 100 other tasks that I never seem to find time for. Olivia studied him for a long moment, and Preston felt exposed under her gaze, as if she could see right through to all his lonely nights and quiet desperation for human connection. All right, she finally said, but just until I can figure out where to go next. I will not bring my trouble to your doorstep longer than necessary. Fair enough. Preston climbed down from the loft and waited while Olivia descended more carefully, her legs shaky from exhaustion and days of walking. In the morning light filtering through the barn doors, he could see more details. The fine quality of her dress beneath the dirt and tears, the small silver locket around her neck, the way she carried herself with a bearing that spoke of education and refinement. She was not some common girl fleeing a bad situation. She had come from money, from society, and she had given it all up rather than submit to a man who would hurt her. He led her to the house, a modest structure his father had built with adobe and wood, designed to stay cool in the brutal Arizona summers. It was simple but solid, with 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, a sitting room, and a covered porch that faced east to catch the sunrise. Preston showed her to the spare bedroom, which held only a bed and a dresser but was clean and private. "There is a wash basin there, and I will heat some water for a proper bath. There are clothes that belong to my mother in the trunk at the foot of the bed. You are about her size. Help yourself to whatever you need." "Thank you, Preston. I do not know how I can ever repay your kindness. You already told me, food that does not taste like leather in a clean house." She managed a small smile, the first he had seen from her, and it transformed her face completely. Preston felt something shift in his chest, a feeling he had not experienced in years, not since Mary Ann Parker had married the banker's son and moved to Phoenix. He left Olivia to rest and went about his morning chores, feeding the horses and the cattle, checking the water troughs, mending a section of fence that had been damaged in the last windstorm. But his mind kept drifting back to the woman in his house, to her story, to the way she had looked at him with those dark eyes full of wariness and hope. By the time he returned to the house, the sun was high, and he was covered in dust and sweat. He found Olivia in the kitchen, wearing one of his mother's simple cotton dresses in pale blue. She had bathed and brushed her hair, which now fell in dark waves past her shoulders. She had also started cooking, and the smell of frying eggs and biscuits filled the air. "I hope you do not mind," she said, gesturing to the stove. "I was hungry and I thought you might be too. Mind, I think I might be dreaming." They ate together at the small wooden table, and Preston found himself telling her about the ranch, about his father's dream of building something lasting in this harsh land, about his own plans to expand the herd and maybe start breeding horses. Olivia listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she understood more about ranching than he would have expected from a city girl. "My grandfather had a ranch in California," she explained. "I spent summers there as a child before he died. I always loved it, the space and the freedom, the way everything felt possible." "Why did your father move to Tucson?" "He wanted to strike it rich in silver. He was convinced he would find a big claim and we would be wealthy beyond measure. Instead, he found poker games and whiskey." The bitterness in her voice was sharp, and Preston understood it. He had seen too many men destroy themselves, and their families chasing dreams that glittered but held no substance. After lunch, Olivia insisted on cleaning the kitchen while Preston went back to work. He spent the afternoon breaking a young horse, a task that required patience and focus, but he found his thoughts continually straying to the house, to the woman inside it, to the strange turn his solitary life had taken in the span of one night. That evening, they ate together again, a simple meal of stew and cornbread that Olivia had somehow turned into something delicious. They talked more easily now, the initial awkwardness fading as they discovered shared opinions on books they had read and places they had seen. Olivia had been educated at a school in San Francisco before her family's fortunes had declined, and she spoke passionately about history and poetry. Subjects Preston had little formal education in but found fascinating when she explained them. "You should not have had to run," he said as the conversation turned more serious. "A woman should not have to choose between safety and security." "The world is not built for women's choices," Olivia replied. "We are property to be traded, bargained with, sold to settle debts." "My father saw me as a solution to his problems, not as a person with my own dreams and fears." "What were your dreams? Before all this?" She was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the table. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to open a school for girls, to give them the education and opportunities I had. I wanted to help them understand that their worth is not determined by the men who claim to own them. You could still do that. Once things settle down, once you are safe. Maybe. Or maybe that dream died when I left Tucson. Dreams have a way of evaporating in the desert sun. Preston wanted to tell her that dreams could survive, that they could even flourish with the right care and determination, but he did not know if she was ready to hear that yet. So instead, he asked, "Do you play chess?" Olivia looked surprised. "Yes, actually. My grandfather taught me." "Good. I have been without a decent opponent for months." They played late into the evening, and Preston discovered that Olivia was an excellent player, strategic and bold. She beat him twice before he managed to secure a victory, and even then he suspected she had been tired rather than outplayed. As they put away the pieces, Olivia yawned and apologized. "I should let you rest. You have to be up early for the ranch. Before you go, I want to ask you something." "How certain are you that Silas will keep looking for you?" Her expression darkened. "Very certain. He sent men after a dance hall girl once who refused his advances. They found her in Flagstaff and dragged her back. I heard she left town a week later, beaten so badly she could barely walk." Preston felt cold fury wash through him. "If his men come here, I will protect you. You have my word. I do not want you getting hurt because of me. I spent 2 years in the cavalry before I came back to run the ranch. I can handle trouble if it comes. But I think we should be prepared, just in case." Over the next few days, Preston taught Olivia to shoot. She had never held a gun before, but she proved to be a quick learner, her hands steady and her focus sharp. They practiced with bottles lined up on fence posts, and by the end of the week, she could hit 4 out of 5 targets consistently. "Not bad," Preston said, grinning at her. "You might make a decent shot yet." "I hope I never have to use this for real," Olivia replied, lowering the pistol. "But I am glad to know I can if I need to." In the evenings, they continued their chess games and conversations. Preston found himself looking forward to dinner with an eagerness that surprised him. Olivia had transformed the house, cleaning and organizing, planting herbs in the garden, hanging curtains she had sewn from fabric she found in a trunk. The space felt like a home now, rather than just a place where he slept between long days of work. But more than the physical changes, Preston noticed the change in himself. He smiled more, laughed at Olivia's dry observations about life, felt a lightness in his chest that had been absent for years. He caught himself watching her as she worked, admiring the graceful way she moved, the concentration on her face when she read in the evening, the rare moments when she forgot her troubles and smiled with genuine joy. 2 weeks after Olivia had arrived, Preston rode into Globe for supplies. The town was small but growing, with a general store, a saloon, a church, and a handful of other businesses clustered along the main street. While the storekeeper filled his order, Preston overheard 2 men talking at the counter. "Heard Silas Cortland is offering $1,000 to anyone who can find that girl who ran out on him," one man said. "Got posters printed up and everything." Preston's blood ran cold. "What girl?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. The man turned to him. "Some fancy piece from Tucson. Was supposed to marry Cortland, but she got cold feet and disappeared. He has men searching all over the territory." "That is a lot of money for a runaway bride," Preston observed. "Cortland does not like being made a fool, and with her father dead, there is no one to pay back what is owed. I guess he figures the girl is his property by right." Preston wanted to argue, to defend Olivia's right to choose her own path, but he kept silent. Drawing attention to himself would only put her in danger. Instead, he finished loading his supplies and rode back to the ranch. his mind racing with plans and contingencies. When he arrived home, he found Olivia in the garden, her hands dirty with soil, her face flushed from the sun. She looked up as he dismounted, and her smile faded when she saw his expression. "What happened?" "Silas has offered a reward for information about you. $1,000. Every bounty hunter and desperate man in the territory will be looking." Olivia stood slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. "Then I need to leave. I will not let you get caught up in this." "Where will you go?" "If you head for California, they will find you on the road. If you go north, same problem. And you cannot go back east toward Tucson." "Then what do you suggest?" Preston had been thinking about this the entire ride home, turning over possibilities and discarding them one by one until only one solution remained. It was crazy, impulsive, and would change everything. But as he looked at Olivia standing in the garden his mother had planted, wearing his mother's dress, fitting into his life as if she had always been meant to be there, he knew it was the right answer. "Marry me," he said. Olivia stared at him as if he had spoken in a foreign language. "What?" "Marry me. If you are my wife, Silas has no claim on you. The debt was your father's, and with him dead, it died too. As my wife, you would have protection, legal standing, a name that is not connected to the Vance family or to Silas Cortland. Preston, you cannot possibly want to marry me. You barely know me. I know that you are brave and kind. I know that you are smart and strong. I know that you make me laugh and that my house feels like a home for the first time since my parents died. I know that I would rather spend every day with you than go back to being alone. Is that enough?" Olivia's eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head slowly. "You deserve better than a marriage of convenience to a woman running from trouble. And you deserve better than a man who would hurt you, who would treat you like property. But here we are, two people who have been dealt difficult hands trying to make the best of what we have." Preston stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. "I am not proposing out of pity or obligation. Over these past 2 weeks, I have come to care for you, Olivia. Maybe it is too soon, maybe it is crazy, but I think we could build something real together. A partnership, a life, and maybe in time, even love. You barely know me," she whispered again, but her voice held less conviction now. "Then tell me more. Tell me everything. We have all night." And so they sat on the porch as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Olivia told him about her childhood in California, about the mother who had died when she was 12, about the slow decline of her family's fortunes and her father's increasing desperation. She told him about the books she loved and the dreams she had nurtured in secret, about the small rebellions she had staged against society's expectations, and the price she had paid for wanting more than she was supposed to have. Preston listened to all of it, and then he told her his own story. He spoke of growing up on the ranch, of the mother who had taught him to read using the Bible and old newspapers, of the father who had been hard but fair, who had worked himself to death trying to make the land yield enough to survive. He told her about his time in the cavalry, about the things he had seen that still haunted him sometimes in the dark of night, about his decision to come home and try to build something lasting, something good. "I am not a rich man," he said, as the stars began to emerge overhead. "This ranch barely turns a profit most years. I cannot offer you the life you were born into, with fancy dresses and parties and servants. What I can offer is honesty, respect, and a chance to build something together. I can offer you safety and partnership and the freedom to be whoever you want to be." Olivia was silent for a long time, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the last light was fading. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "My whole life, men have tried to control me. My father, my teachers, Silas. They all thought they knew what was best for me, what I should do, who I should be. And I am terrified of making the same mistake, of trading one cage for another. Then do not marry me because you are scared or desperate. Marry me because you want to, because you think we could make each other happy, because you can see a future here that is worth fighting for. And if you cannot see that, if you need more time, then take it. I will help you get to California or wherever else you want to go. I will give you money and supplies and a horse. Your choice, Olivia. Always your choice. She turned to look at him then, really look at him, and Preston felt naked under her gaze, as if she could see every fear and hope and secret desire he had ever harbored. The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Yes, she said finally. Yes, I will marry you. Preston felt something enormous shift in his chest, a weight lifting that he had not known he was carrying. You are sure? No, Olivia said, and then she smiled, that rare, beautiful smile that transformed her entire face. But I think the best things in life require a leap of faith, and I think maybe, just maybe, this could be the best decision I have ever made. They were married 3 days later by the circuit judge who passed through Globe once a month. The ceremony was simple, held in the judge's office with the storekeeper and his wife serving as witnesses. Olivia wore a dress she had altered from one of his mother's better ones, and Preston wore his Sunday suit, carefully brushed and pressed. The judge asked the traditional questions. They spoke the traditional vows, and just like that, Olivia Vance became Olivia Jameson. As they rode back to the ranch in the wagon, Olivia was quiet, her hands folded in her lap, her expression thoughtful. Preston wondered if she was regretting her decision already, if the reality of what they had done was settling over her like a suffocating blanket. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I was just thinking how strange it is that my life can change so completely in such a short time. A month ago, I thought I knew exactly what my future held, and it was terrible. Now I have no idea what comes next, and somehow that is less frightening. We will figure it out together." "Preston, about tonight." She paused, her cheeks coloring slightly. "I know this is a real marriage, legally binding, but I do not expect you to demand anything from me. I mean, I do not expect you to insist on certain rights." Preston guided the horses around a rut in the road, taking his time before responding. "Olivia, I meant what I said about this being your choice. All of it, including that. We are partners first. Anything else will only happen if and when you want it to." The relief in her expression was palpable, and Preston felt a surge of anger toward all the men who had made her fear what should be a joyful thing between two people who cared for each other. That night, Preston moved his things into the small room he had been using as an office, and Olivia kept the main bedroom. It was not a traditional arrangement, but then again, nothing about their situation was traditional. They ate dinner together, played chess, and talked late into the evening as they had been doing, but there was a new awareness between them now, a sense of connection that went beyond friendship. Over the next few weeks, they settled into married life. Preston continued working the ranch, and Olivia took over management of the house and garden. She proved to be an excellent cook and a skilled gardener, coaxing vegetables from the desert soil with determination and ingenuity. She also began teaching reading to the children of the ranch hands who worked on neighboring properties, fulfilling at least a small part of her dream. Preston found himself falling in love with his wife in increments, small moments that accumulated into something profound. The way she sang while she worked, old songs his mother had sung. The way she always saved him the last piece of cornbread because she knew it was his favorite. The way she looked at sunset, her face peaceful and content. The way she laughed at his jokes, even the terrible ones. The way she touched his hand sometimes when they talked, as if seeking connection. One evening about 6 weeks after their marriage, as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge, Olivia said, "I received a letter today, from a lawyer in Tucson." Preston felt tension coil in his shoulders. "What did it say?" "Apparently, my father had a life insurance policy. It was not much, just $500, but it went to me as his only heir. The lawyer wants to know where to send the check." "That is good news, is it not, I suppose?" "It is just strange to think that my father's death is worth exactly $500 to the insurance company. That his entire life, all his dreams and failures, can be reduced to a number on a piece of paper. People are worth more than money, even when they make mistakes." "Your father loved you, Olivia. He was just weak, and weakness made him cruel. That does not mean his whole life was without value." She leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture that had become natural over the past weeks, and Preston wrapped his arm around her. "When did you become so wise?" "I think it was sometime around 3 in the morning on a September night when I found a woman sleeping in my hayloft." Olivia laughed, and the sound filled Preston with warmth. She tilted her head up to look at him, and suddenly they were very close, her face just inches from his. He could see the starlight reflected in her eyes, could feel the warmth of her breath. "Preston," she whispered, "I think I am falling in love with you." "Good," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "because I have been in love with you for weeks now." She kissed him then, soft and tentative at first, then deeper as he responded. It was the first time they had kissed since their wedding, where the judge had prompted them to seal their vows with a brief, chaste peck. This was different, full of promise and desire and the building intensity of feelings long suppressed. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Olivia said, "I think maybe I do not need my own bedroom anymore." Preston stood and offered her his hand. "Are you sure?" "Very sure." That night marked a new chapter in their marriage, a deepening of their connection that felt natural and right. Preston was gentle and patient, and Olivia discovered that intimacy could be tender rather than frightening, something to be shared rather than endured. In the morning, Preston woke to find Olivia already up, making breakfast, humming one of her songs. She smiled at him when he entered the kitchen, a smile full of joy and contentment, and Preston thought he had never seen anything more beautiful in his life. "Good morning, husband," she said. "Good morning, wife." The fall passed into winter, and the ranch thrived under their joint management. Preston expanded the herd with Olivia's insurance money, and they hired 2 reliable ranch hands to help with the increased workload. Olivia's teaching expanded too, and soon she was holding classes 3 days a week for a dozen children from the surrounding area. One day in late November, a man rode up to the ranch. He was well dressed, with expensive boots and a coat that marked him as someone with money. Preston met him in the yard, his hand resting casually on his pistol. "Can I help you?" "I am looking for Preston Jameson." "You found him." The man dismounted and extended his hand. "My name is Lawrence Curtis. I am a lawyer from Tucson. I have been trying to track down a woman named Olivia Vance. I was told she might be in this area." Preston kept his expression neutral. "Why are you looking for her?" "I represent the estate of her late father. There are some matters that need to be settled." "I also have a message from Silas Cortland." "Olivia Vance is dead," Preston said flatly. Curtis looked surprised. "Dead? When? How?" "She died of fever about 2 months ago. I buried her on my land." The lie came easily, and Preston was grateful that Olivia was inside the house where Curtis could not see her. "That is terrible news. Mr. Cortland will be most distressed." "I am sure he will recover. Now, if you will excuse me, I have work to do." Curtis remounted his horse, but he paused before leaving. "If you do not mind my asking, how did Miss Vance come to be on your property?" "Found her by the side of the road." She was sick and alone. I tried to help her, but it was too late." Curtis nodded slowly, his eyes searching Preston's face for any sign of deception. But Preston had learned to school his expressions during his time in the cavalry, and he met the lawyer's gaze steadily. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Jameson, and please accept my condolences on your loss." Preston watched Curtis ride away, waiting until he was completely out of sight before going into the house. He found Olivia standing by the window, her face pale. "I heard," she said. "Do you think he believed you?" "I think so, but we need to be careful. If Silas does not believe you are dead, he might send more people. Maybe I should head to California like I originally planned." "You are not going anywhere. You are my wife, Olivia. We are in this together, whatever comes." She came to him then, wrapping her arms around his waist and burying her face in his chest. "I am so tired of being afraid." "Then stop being afraid. We have done nothing wrong. You are legally married to me. Even if Silas Cortland showed up on our doorstep tomorrow, he would have no claim on you. The law is on our side. The law does not always matter when a man has enough money and power. Then we will make sure he never finds you. Olivia Vance is dead and buried. Only Olivia Jameson exists now." Christmas came, and they decorated the house with pine boughs from the mountains and candles in the windows. Preston gave Olivia a beautiful leather-bound journal he had ordered from a catalog, and she gave him a pair of riding gloves she had sewn herself, with intricate stitching along the cuffs. They spent Christmas Eve in front of the fireplace, reading aloud to each other from a book of poems Olivia loved. As the new year of 1884 arrived, Olivia announced she was pregnant. Preston was overjoyed, picking her up and spinning her around the kitchen until she laughed and begged him to put her down. That night, they talked about names and dreams, about what kind of parents they wanted to be, about the life they would build for their child. The pregnancy was not easy. Olivia was sick for the first few months, barely able to keep food down. Preston worried constantly, bringing her ginger tea and crackers, rubbing her back when she was ill, staying with her through the long nights when she could not sleep. But gradually, she improved, and by spring, she was blooming, her skin glowing and her energy returning. In April, a group of rough-looking men rode through the area, asking questions about a woman matching Olivia's description. Preston told them the same story he had told the lawyer, and he made sure Olivia stayed out of sight. The men were suspicious, but without proof, they could do nothing. They moved on after a few days, and Preston hoped they had finally given up the search. Summer arrived, bringing brutal heat and challenges for the ranch. One of the wells ran dry, and Preston had to dig a new one, backbreaking work that took weeks. Olivia, now heavily pregnant, kept the house running and continued teaching, though she had to sit while conducting her lessons. In late August, when the heat was at its worst, Olivia went into labor. Preston rode for the midwife from town, Mrs. Henderson, a capable woman who had delivered half the babies in the county. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Preston stayed by Olivia's side, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, feeling helpless and terrified as she struggled to bring their child into the world. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, a baby's cry filled the house. Mrs. Henderson cleaned and wrapped the baby, then handed the bundle to Preston. "You have a son," she said, smiling. Preston looked down at the tiny face, red and wrinkled and perfect, and felt tears streaming down his face. "A son," he whispered. "Mrs. Henderson let him hold the baby for a moment, then took the child to Olivia, who was exhausted but smiling. She cradled their son against her chest, and Preston sat beside them, his arm around his wife, staring in wonder at the life they had created. "What should we name him?" Olivia asked. I was thinking James after my father. James Preston Jameson. James, Olivia repeated, testing the name. I like it. Hello, James. Welcome to your wild, beautiful world. The baby grew strong and healthy, thriving under Olivia's devoted care. Preston found fatherhood both terrifying and exhilarating, this tiny person who depended on them for everything. He would sometimes sit by the cradle at night, watching his son sleep, marveling at the perfection of small fingers and toes, at the miracle of new life. As James approached his first birthday, the ranch continued to prosper. Preston had gained a reputation for breeding quality horses, and buyers came from as far as California to purchase his stock. Olivia's school had grown to 20 students, and she had started a lending library using books donated by families in Globe. Their life had settled into a comfortable rhythm, full of work and love and the small joys of family. One afternoon in early October of 1885, a familiar figure rode up to the ranch. It was Lawrence Curtis, the lawyer from Tucson. Preston felt his stomach drop as he went to meet him. "Mr. Curtis, what brings you back this way?" The lawyer dismounted, and Preston noticed he looked tired and older than he had 2 years ago. "Mr. Jameson, I need to speak with you about Olivia Vance. I told you she is dead." "No, she is not, and I know she is here." Preston's hand moved to his pistol, but Curtis held up his hands. "Please hear me out. I am not here to cause trouble. Silas Cortland is dead." Preston felt the world tilt. "What? He died 3 months ago. Pneumonia." "I am here as the executor of his estate, and I have some information that concerns Miss Vance. Or I suppose she is Mrs. Jameson now." Preston stared at the lawyer, trying to process this news. Finally, he said, "Wait here." He went into the house and found Olivia in the kitchen, preparing dinner while James played at her feet with wooden blocks. "Olivia, Curtis is here. He says Silas is dead." The color drained from her face. "Dead? That is what he says. He wants to talk to us. Are you willing to see him?" Olivia looked down at James, then back at Preston. Yes, I want to hear what he has to say." They brought Curtis into the house, and he accepted a cup of coffee, settling into a chair at the kitchen table. James toddled over to investigate the stranger, and Curtis smiled. "He looks like you, Mrs. Jameson." "What do you want, Mr. Curtis?" Olivia asked, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. "First, I want to apologize. I suspected 2 years ago that Mr. Jameson was lying about your death, but I reported to Mr. Cortland that I believed his story. I could see that you had found a good life here, and I did not think Cortland deserved to take that away from you." "Why would you do that?" Preston asked. "Because I knew what kind of man Silas Cortland was. I handled his legal affairs for 15 years, and I saw the way he treated people, especially women. When your father came to him with his debts, Mrs. Jameson, I tried to talk Cortland out of demanding marriage as payment. I told him it was barbaric, that he could simply forgive the debt or work out a payment plan. But he was obsessed with possessing you. He saw you as a prize, something beautiful that he could own and control." Olivia's hands were shaking, and Preston reached over to take one in his own. "You still have not told us why you are here." Curtis pulled a document from his bag. "When Cortland died, his estate went through probate. In going through his papers, I discovered that your father's debt was not $5,000. It was $500. Cortland had altered the records to make the debt seem larger than it was, to give himself more leverage to force the marriage." Olivia gasped. "500? But my father said it was 5,000. Cortland lied to both of you." $500 was still more than your father could pay immediately, but it was not an insurmountable sum. Had your father known the truth, he might have found other options. Curtis slid the document across the table. "I have written a sworn statement attesting to the fraud." This document proves that Cortland's claim on you was based on false information. You were never obligated to marry him, Mrs. Jameson, legally or morally." Tears streamed down Olivia's face, and Preston pulled her into his arms. She sobbed against his chest, years of fear and guilt pouring out in a torrent of emotion. Curtis waited patiently, sipping his coffee and playing peek-a-boo with James, who had decided the stranger was acceptable after all. When Olivia finally composed herself, Curtis continued, "There is more. Cortland left most of his estate to distant cousins, but in his will, he included a provision that if you were found alive, you were to receive $10,000. I think it was his way of easing a guilty conscience, or perhaps he genuinely believed in his twisted way that he had cared for you. Regardless, the money is yours if you want it." Preston and Olivia looked at each other in shock. $10,000 was a fortune, enough to expand the ranch significantly, to build a real school for Olivia, to secure James's future. "I do not want his money," Olivia said quietly. "Blood money." "It is your decision entirely," Curtis said. "But if I may offer some advice, do not let pride or anger rob you of an opportunity. That money could do a lot of good in the right hands. You could use it to help other women in situations like yours, to build that school you dreamed of, to make sure other girls have choices you were nearly denied." Olivia was silent for a long moment, her hand resting on James's head as he played at her feet. Finally, she nodded. "All right. But I want the money put into a trust, used specifically for education, for girls who would not otherwise have opportunities. A noble purpose. I will draw up the papers." Curtis stayed for dinner, and they talked late into the evening about his plans for the trust, about the legal steps needed to ensure Olivia was completely free of any connection to Cortland's estate beyond the educational fund. By the time he left the next morning, Preston felt as if an enormous weight had been lifted from their shoulders. That night, as they lay in bed with James sleeping peacefully in his cradle nearby, Olivia said, "I cannot believe it is really over. I keep waiting for something else to go wrong." "It is over, love. You are free. We are free. I wasted so much time being afraid, looking over my shoulder, waiting for someone to come and drag me back. You were not wasting time. You were surviving, building a life, becoming the person you were meant to be. And look at what you have accomplished. A school, a family, a home. You should be proud." Olivia rolled over to face him, her eyes shining in the moonlight coming through the window. "I never would have had any of this without you. Without that night you found me in your barn and decided to help a stranger. Best decision I ever made. I love you, Preston Jameson, more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. I love you too, Olivia Jameson. Always. The years that followed were good ones." The ranch prospered, and Preston and Olivia became respected members of the community. Olivia's school grew into a proper building thanks to the Cortland Trust, and she taught there 4 days a week, inspiring a generation of girls to dream bigger than the constraints society tried to place on them. James was joined by a sister, Anna, 2 years later, and then another brother, Michael, 2 years after that. The house that had once been so quiet and lonely now rang with the sounds of children laughing, playing, arguing, learning. Preston would sometimes pause in his work and listen to the noise, feeling grateful for the fullness of his life. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Preston took Olivia into Globe for a rare night away from the children, who were staying with Mrs. Henderson. They had dinner at the hotel restaurant, dressed in their finest clothes, and afterward they walked along the main street under the stars. "You ever regret it?" Preston asked. "Marrying me so quickly, giving up the life you might have had?" Olivia stopped walking and turned to face him, her expression serious. "Preston Jameson, I have never regretted a single moment of our life together. That night in your barn when I was at my lowest point, when I thought I had lost everything, you gave me hope. You gave me a choice when everyone else was trying to take my choices away. And you gave me love, real love, the kind that does not seek to control or diminish but to lift up and celebrate. How could I ever regret that? Preston kissed her there on the street, not caring who might see, and felt the same surge of emotion he had felt on their wedding day, the same certainty that this woman was his partner in every way that mattered. As they walked back to the hotel, Olivia said, "I have been thinking about expanding the school again. There are girls in some of the more remote ranches who cannot make it to town for classes. I thought maybe we could do a traveling school where I go to them a few times a month." "That is a lot of extra work." "I know, but I keep thinking about who I was when I showed up at your ranch, how desperate I was, how few options I had. If I can help other girls avoid that desperation, if I can give them skills and confidence to forge their own paths, then all the work will be worth it. Then we will make it happen. We will get you a good horse and a wagon, and I will make sure the route is safe. You always support my dreams." That is what partners do. The traveling school became a reality, and Olivia spent 2 days a month visiting outlying ranches, teaching girls who had never had access to formal education. She taught them reading, writing, arithmetic, but also practical skills like accounting, contract law, and how to recognize their legal rights. More than one ranching family found their operations improved significantly after their daughters applied what Olivia had taught them. As the children grew, Preston taught them everything he knew about ranching. James proved to be a natural with horses, able to calm even the most skittish animals with patience and intuition. Anna had her mother's love of learning and announced at 10 years old that she wanted to be a doctor, a profession almost unheard of for women. Michael was the dreamer of the family, always building elaborate structures with whatever materials he could find, talking about designing buildings that could withstand the harsh desert climate. Preston and Olivia supported all their children's dreams, even when those dreams seemed impractical or unlikely. They had learned from their own experiences that denying a person's dreams could lead to bitterness and regret, and they were determined their children would have every opportunity to pursue their passions. In 1895, on a warm spring evening, Preston and Olivia sat on their porch watching the sunset. James, now 11, was working with a young colt in the corral. Anna, 9, was reading a medical text that the doctor in Globe had loaned her. Michael, 7, was drawing plans for a new barn design. Inside the house, a fourth child, Sarah, napped in her cradle, born just 6 months earlier when Olivia was 40. "We did all right, did we not?" Preston said, taking Olivia's hand. "We did more than all right. We built something beautiful. Do you remember that first night in the barn? What you were thinking when you woke up and saw me standing there?" Olivia laughed. "I thought you were going to turn me in for the reward, or worse. I was terrified. But then you spoke, and there was something in your voice, something kind and gentle, and I thought maybe, just maybe, I had found someone good. And had you, the very best. You saved my life that night, Preston. Not just from Sela's Cortland, but from despair, from giving up, from believing that I did not deserve happiness. You showed me what love should be, what partnership looks like, how to build a life based on respect and trust rather than fear and control." Preston kissed her temple, breathing in the familiar scent of the lavender soap she used, feeling the weight of her head on his shoulder. "You saved me too, you know. I was so lonely before you arrived. I had given up on the idea of having a family, of sharing my life with someone. I thought I would just work the ranch until I died, and that would be the sum of my existence. You gave me purpose, joy, a reason to build something that would last beyond my own lifetime. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and the stars emerged. James finished working with the colt and came to join them on the porch, smelling of horses and hay and youth. Anna abandoned her book to catch fireflies with her brothers, their laughter ringing across the yard. Baby Sarah woke and cried, and Olivia went to tend to her, returning a few minutes later with the infant in her arms. "Papa, tell us the story again," Michael said, climbing into Preston's lap even though he was getting too big for such things. "About how you and Mama met." Preston looked at Olivia, and she smiled, nodding. It was a story their children never tired of hearing, a tale of fate and courage and love found in unexpected places. "Well," Preston began, his voice taking on the rhythm of a story told many times before, "it was September of 1883, and I heard a noise in the barn in the middle of the night." "And you thought it was a horse thief," Anna chimed in, having heard the story dozens of times. "I did indeed. So I grabbed my rifle and went to investigate. And do you know what I found?" "Mama," Michael said with delight. "Your mother, sleeping in the hayloft, looking like she had been through a terrible ordeal, and I knew right then that my life was about to change forever." Olivia took over the story, telling the children an age-appropriate version of her flight from Tucson, her fear and exhaustion, her hope that she had found sanctuary. She told them about their father's kindness, his proposal, their quick marriage. "But I thought you had to know someone a long time before you married them," James said, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Usually, yes," Preston said. "But sometimes when you meet the right person, you just know. Your heart recognizes them, even if your head is still catching up." "That is silly," Anna pronounced. "Marriage should be based on compatibility and shared values, not feelings." "It should be based on both," Olivia corrected gently. "Love without respect and partnership is just passion, and that fades, but partnership without love is just a business arrangement. Your father and I had to learn to balance both to build friendship and respect alongside the love we felt." "And did it work?" Michael asked. Preston and Olivia looked at each other and smiled. "What do you think?" Preston asked. "I think it worked," Michael said decisively. "Because you always hold hands, and you smile when you look at each other, and you never yell like Mr. Henderson yells at Mrs. Henderson." "We have our disagreements," Olivia said. "No marriage is perfect. But we have learned to talk through our problems, to listen to each other, to remember that we are on the same team." As the children grew older, and the family expanded to include grandchildren, Preston and Olivia remained each other's constants. They worked side by side on the ranch, which James eventually took over, allowing Preston to semi-retire in his 60s. They celebrated birthdays and holidays, weathered droughts and economic downturns, supported their children through triumphs and heartbreaks. Anna did become a doctor, studying in San Francisco and returning to Globe to open a practice, where she served the community for 40 years. Michael became an architect, designing schools and hospitals throughout the territory, and later the state when Arizona achieved statehood in 1912. James expanded the ranch and became known for breeding the finest horses in the Southwest. And Sarah, the youngest, became a teacher like her mother, eventually taking over the school Olivia had founded. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1923, Preston and Olivia sat on the same porch where they had sat so many times before. They were both in their 70s now, moving slower, with white hair and faces marked by time and sun. But their hands still sought each other automatically, and their love had only deepened with the decades. 40 years, Olivia marveled. "How is that possible? It feels like just yesterday that you found me in your barn." "Best September night of my life," Preston said. though I do not recommend finding one's wife in a hayloft as a general strategy." Olivia laughed, the sound still bright despite the years. "No, I suppose that is not a situation most people should aim for, though it worked out rather well for us." They watched as their grandchildren played in the yard, a boisterous group ranging from toddlers to teenagers. James's son was teaching the younger ones to rope, while Anna's daughter helped Sarah's twins with their schoolwork at the outdoor table. The family had grown so large now that gatherings required tables set end to end and enough food to feed a small army. "You ever think about how different everything could have been?" Olivia asked. "If I had not stopped at your ranch that night, if you had turned me away, if I had made it to California." "Sometimes. But I try not to dwell on the paths not taken. We chose each other, Olivia. Every day for 40 years we have chosen each other. That is what matters." "I chose well," she said softly. "So did I, love, so did I." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in the same shades of orange and pink and purple that had marked so many of their evenings together, Preston and Olivia Jameson sat hand in hand, surrounded by the family they had built, the legacy they had created, and the love that had sustained them through 4 decades of joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge. They had started with nothing but hope and desperation, a chance meeting in a hayloft, a proposal made by morning light. They had built a life that exceeded their wildest dreams, not because it was perfect, but because they had faced it together, as partners, as lovers, as best friends. In the years that followed, they continued to be the heart of their family, the example their children and grandchildren looked to when navigating their own relationships. Preston died peacefully in his sleep at 78, with Olivia holding his hand. She followed him 3 years later, at 81, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, her last words a whispered, "Tell your grandfather I am coming home." They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their headstones simple, Preston and Olivia Jameson, partners in life and love. The ranch James inherited flourished for generations, and Olivia's school became a regional institution, educating thousands of students. But perhaps their greatest legacy was the model they provided, proof that love could flourish in the harshest conditions, that 2 broken people could heal each other, that a chance encounter could change the course of not just 2 lives but generations. The barn where Preston had found Olivia still stood decades later, preserved by the family as a reminder of where it all began. The grandchildren would play there, climbing into the hayloft, listening as their parents told them the story of the lonely cowboy and the desperate woman, of a proposal made by morning light, of a love that had changed everything. And on quiet September nights when the wind blew through the valley and the stars shone bright overhead, some said you could still hear echoes of that first meeting, of Preston's gentle voice saying, "I am not going to hurt you," and Olivia's whispered, "Thank you," the beginning of a conversation that would last a lifetime. Their story became legend in Globe, told and retold, embellished and celebrated. But the truth was simple and profound. They had found each other when they both needed saving, and in saving each other, they had discovered that love was not about perfection or ideal circumstances. It was about choosing someone every day, about building a partnership based on respect and trust, about creating something beautiful from unpromising beginnings. Preston had been right that morning when he proposed. They had built something real together, a partnership that became a great love, a marriage that produced a family, a legacy that lasted long after they were gone. And it all started with a woman sleeping in a hayloft, and a man kind enough to offer help instead of judgment, brave enough to offer his heart by morning light.